So welcome everyone to our Sunday lesson for February 5th, 2023. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Wendy Carr. I'm a licensed Unity teacher, and it's my pleasure today to continue a series on the 12 powers, one of Unity's core teachings. The month of February, depending who you ask, will either be strength, which is what it was in the original book, or love. And the reason that that was done was so that the children could have Valentine's Day lined with love. I tend to be more traditional because I can see usefulness in going with the original lineup. And we're going to talk about strength with a little touch of love just because we can. So for those of you who are saying, what is this 12 powers you're talking about? Also known as the 12 faculties, 12 attributes, the 12 divine gifts. Our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, discerned that for him, it was difficult to chew all of the spiritual aspects in one bite. And so he broke it down into 12, following on Jesus's 12 disciples. And each month we have a power, and associated with that is a body space, a disciple, and a color. Some folks have other things that they align with it, but those are the main three. So last month, January, was faith. This month is strength. March will be wisdom, and so on and so forth, as you can see on the screen. So just to give you a little bit about faith, because I didn't speak last month on the subject. So there's two levels of faith, really. There's blind faith, intellectual faith, that part of us that is trusting that something will happen or hoping that something will happen. And then we have understanding faith and spiritual faith. That's that part of us that knows that we know that we know that we know, and we can't explain it. That's that part of us that knows that we are supposed to be in a certain place at a certain time, not because our schedule says so, but because there's this urge within us to be at a certain place at a certain time or have a conversation with someone that we can't explain, but it just is. Now, I don't want you to see it separate like that. I want you to see it like a rug that has all the colors, all the aspects of faith woven within. And so we're not trying to be in our spiritual faith at all times. If we could, I don't think we'd be on planet Earth because we wouldn't have lessons to learn. But instead, to draw on our faith to the best of our ability in every circumstance. And from that foundation of faith, we're now going to add strength. Now, there's more than 4 types. I've just broken it down into 4 because otherwise we'd be here all day. So physical strength, that's very explainable. Is that a word? It is now. That we have people who can lift heavy things. We have examples in the animal species of things like ants that, can carry so many times their body weight. And we have that aspect. And that's usually what we think of. If someone says the word strength to you, you think about muscular, you think about that force. The second one I've selected is emotional strength. That's our ability to get through things that are difficult, those challenges in life. And sometimes we have great emotional strength, and sometimes we just totally break down later. So it's not always that we're in that space, but that we have that capacity to be strong in the moment and perhaps allow it to dissipate afterwards. Intellectual strength, that's that part of us that just digs our heels in and says, I know I'm right, and this is why, and and gets into that space, which can be healthy in the human world, sometimes not so much in the spiritual, as I'll talk about. And then finally, spiritual strength, that ability to go within, to know within that aspect of ourselves, that ability to just go with the flow as life unfolds. We've had a lot of changes in the last couple of years. I guess it's 3 years now with COVID. Things are happening, and just being able to be centered and poised in the midst of the chaos is a great spiritual attribute. From our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, actually from his book on prosperity. We know that strength is manifest everywhere, for we see it in the mechanical world. A great locomotive starts from the depot, moving slowly at first, but when it gains momentum, it speeds down the track like a street. Thus it is with spiritual strength. Beginning sometimes with a very small thought, it takes on momentum and eventually becomes a powerful idea. I wonder what Charles would have to say about the high-speed trains that we're using now. So I have been using this idea of building a structure just because I'm a very visual learner. So when I learned 12 powers, it was just rote of all these aspects of it. And over time, I came to learn that if I could see it as a building, that it made more sense to me. So faith is our foundation. Faith is that part that makes sure that everything is firm, that everything is solid, and that it will survive any earthquake, any emotional earthquake, anything that life throws at us. So I've put our emotional foundation, our emotional strength first. I've done that for a reason, because as you get into your emotional strength, as you get into a space where you can understand and be at peace with your emotions, as Ram Dass would say, invite them in for tea, have a discussion, and then invite them to leave. We can get into that space, acknowledging those aspects of the human experience. You know, it's said that if you don't deal with your shadow self, those negative emotions that we all want to bypass, they will come back to bite you. And I could provide you plenty of proof from my own life existence of that. So emotional strength, that's our first pillar of our frame here. Let's go forwards. Oh, don't know how I did that. Second pillar that I've put on is physical. And that's because we do need some physical strength. You know, we need to be able to lift a mug successfully if we are going to drink from it. We need to be able to lift that jug of washer fluid to put it into our vehicle so that we can drive safely in the wintertime. We need to have some of that physical strength. If we don't have physical strength, then our body just kind of is a jellyfish and we can't do things. So physical strength is very important. It's not so important for me that I go out to a gym and lift weights. I don't do that. That's not my kind of physical strength building. I have other ways. And it's a part of being human. Intellectual strength. It can be a negative, it can be a positive. It's got both aspects to it. It can be very stubborn in a negative way, that you entrench yourself and say this way or the highway. And it can also be a very good thing to say, this is what I believe. These are my boundaries, and I will stand up for it. And that can be a very hard one if you're in a situation where you have family or colleagues who don't agree with you on all things. But being able to have that intellectual strength to know your truth, to know your personal credo, and to stand by it is a very much a part of building our house of strength. And lastly, but by no means all, is spiritual strength. That, as I said, that ability to be in that calm, that eye of the hurricane, that poise, that, you know, people will notice if you're the calm one in the room during a situation. Now, you may notice there's kind of a dance here going on. I've got spiritual opposite to physical, emotional opposite to intellectual, and that's intentional, because all four are doing this dance. We're not just staying in one or the other, because otherwise what we build on top of this will go skewing. But we want to be in balance to the best of our ability. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just to be mindful of it as we go through. So you might be saying, oh, well, this is very well and good, Wendy, but how do we do this? I'm glad you asked. From Reverend Jim Rosemurgy, physical strength comes from fatiguing the muscles a bit so they bounce back stronger than before. Spiritual strength, we are told, comes from quietness, stillness, and silence. Those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. That's from the Psalms. Amazing, isn't it, that spiritual strength comes from inactivity, while physical strength comes from action. However, once we feel the strength only Spirit can give, then we are prepared to move forward with boldness and daring. I love that. Move forward with boldness and daring. Are you ready to move forward with boldness and daring? So in 2010, Unity published a booklet about the 12 spiritual abilities to change your life. I believe a copy of it is available at our website, unityhaltonpeel.ca.org. I've forgotten, mea culpa. It'll be on the screen shortly. Now, they've given us 7 steps, and I don't want you, I've said this before, I'll continue to say it. I don't want you to think of this as being linear. It's not. It's kind of spiral. It's like doing a connect the dots or going through a maze that you might take a step forward, you might take 2 steps back, you might take 2 steps forward, take a step back. You see it? It's a dance. It's not looking at it and saying, I have to be on this step at any given time. For me, it's a way of kind of checking in and seeing, is there any shadow work I need to do? Is there something that I've got that's a past belief that's no longer serving, but it's acting as an anchor and keeping me from moving forward? So the first step is non-resistance. Resistance is the greatest theft of strength. Anger, fear, argument, and other forms of resistance are emotions that leave one feeling depleted and weak. I like to think of when I have to open a pickle jar. I'll turn until I can't turn anymore, and then I'll stop, I'll take my hand off, and on that last turn, which I always do more gently, it pops. Why? Because I've moved from resistance into non-resistance. I've just willed the jar to open. And so too with our relationships, getting into ones where we're feeling that tension with another, just kind of breathing through it and finding ways of letting it go, letting it be at peace, perhaps not just getting rid of it, but just allowing the emotions around it to dissipate. Second, relaxation. Speak to the various parts of your body and tell them to relax. Speak to your mind and tell it in a relaxed way to release tense thoughts and attitudes. In our daily words today, we were told about our other co-founder, Myrtle Fillmore. This is the core of her healing. She spoke to her body. She apologized for thinking it to be weak and unable to do its job. And she blessed it as a gift from God. And in 2 years, she healed herself of tuberculosis. The key, though, anyone who's been a parent will tell you that telling a child and screaming at them to calm down generally tends to exacerbate the situation rather than calm it down. So too with ourselves. If you're yelling at yourself to calm down and relax, it might not work as effectively as taking a deep breath and saying, I will be calm. I am willing to be calm. I am calm. Infilling. One of the things I find in spiritual discussion is that oftentimes we bring forward our commercial consumer self that believes that we have to give. If you don't give the right present, you're not worthy. If you don't give the right present, then people won't like you. And yet the other half of that equation is receiving. Open yourself to God for the inflow of strength as a spiritual gift. This is not straining to receive, but rather opening to vital life through your whole being. Acknowledging that you have spiritual strength within you, even if you're not aware of it right now, even if you don't feel particularly spiritually strong, even if circumstances feel like they are overwhelming you. Take that time just to say, yes, divine strength is a part of me, and I claim it as my own. And this is that opportunity to inflow, to receive. There are many stories in our Unity history of people who suddenly realized that they had forgotten to say, I now receive gratefully and graciously. And those are some of the most important words, because we do focus on giving and being there for people, and we forget that we need to have that inflow. Direction. Good management is important. Guide the strength you are receiving from God into channels of good. This is that opportunity to be in the flow, to find ways to help another, help yourself, have the strength to do that hard inner work. And I say hard not to affirm that that's how it is, but my experience has been, I tend to bypass spiritual shadow work because it's painful, because it brings up memories that I have long buried because I didn't want to look at them again. And yet in going through that, directing my strength through that process, affirming that I have the spiritual strength to come out the other side of this valley of the shadow of death is so important. Not necessarily easy, but very much a vital part of our well-being, both spiritually and emotionally. Incorporation. Jesus incorporated ideas of strength into his mind and body and built an ability to cope with life above and beyond anything we normally see. And Jesus said, follow me. And some of you might be going, oh, the Jesus word. Oh, don't like the Jesus word. May I invite you to consider Jesus not as a savior, but as a teacher, as someone who demonstrated spiritual principles to a level that hadn't been seen before, has probably been seen since. There are many mystics and teachers that we have and have had in our universe, in our world, who have been able to do similar things. So rather than saying you have to say, oh yes, Jesus is my one and only. No, the Fillmores chose Jesus because they wanted this to be a Christian movement, because that's where they were. They both had a belief in the Christian teachings of Jesus. What they wanted to do was pull out the teachings from all the other trappings that had been added on in the millennia since. And so if the word Jesus triggers you, find another word. Find a different teacher that you admire who can provide you that guidance of, here's how to be the calm in the midst of the storm. Here's how to be strong when others are condemning you. Here's how to overcome those things that seemed unsurmountable. Strength. After you have learned to receive strength from God, you will find it easy to stand firm in your purpose and direction. This is a higher state insofar as being able to stand firm in all things. I am not here yet. I've had moments when I have been in this space, thank you God, because I needed to be. And I know that there are times I get triggered, and you don't want to see me when I'm triggered. It's not pretty. And the after effect when I realize I've been triggered and I've reacted, and instead of responding, isn't particularly pretty either. But guess what? I'm still human, and it's part of my human journey. But being able to stand firm, not just in your emotional strength or your intellectual strength or your physical strength, but to have that additional pillar of your spiritual strength, your ability to know you are firmly standing on the foundation of your faith. And eventually you will have all the 12 powers with you, but that you are firmly in that grounding of knowing you are that you are that you are. And you are a divine being. Final step, supreme strength. Definitely not living in this consciousness yet. Perhaps I will someday. I don't know. I have no idea how long I'm going to be here for. But this is the path that I am following. The supreme idea of strength is so incorporated into your whole being that it flows through you as the perfect ability to receive and use strength from God to fill every need. This is the stage that we believe Jesus was at, that it was such a part of him that he didn't have to think about it, that there was no human consciousness to it. It just was. It just emitted from him in every situation. And as you go through the Gospels, you see that, where he's so confident. I mean, did he ask people to pray with him that he would have the strength to raise Lazarus? No, he gave thanks and said, we're told in a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And this is what supreme strength represents. So we have, you can see I've got my 2 pillars of strength on the sides, my faith, and then all the other 12 come in. And I don't want you to think of it as being in order like this. I invite you to think of it instead that it's all over the wall in different spaces where it's needed. And eventually we'll put some windows and doors and fancy stuff in here. But this is my goal for 2023, is to help us build this foundation, this spiritual foundation of all of our 12 powers, of all of those aspects that are beyond our humanness and that bring to our humanness great understanding, great joy, great peace, and great prosperity. And that's my talk. And as we move into our meditation, I'm going to invite you to think on these words, these questions. What does strength mean to me? Has it changed in the last few minutes as we've gone through our book on strength and the other powers? Where am I strong? I know some places that I'm very strong. I'm very firm. I know some other places where I'm not. And the question is, do I need to strengthen those areas? And how can I balance strength and love? We often don't think of those two together. Often right now, if you turn on the news, most of the strength is military strength or us versus them kind of strength. It's a battle. And yet love tempers strength. And love can be a strength. We've all heard stories about a child being trapped under a car or something, and someone coming, a parent or a caregiver, and being able to lift that car up so the child could get out, and later asked to reproduce it, they couldn't. And that is our balance of strength and love. So with those thoughts in our mind, I just invite you, I'm going to leave this screen on so you can refer to them if you need to. I just invite you to give a little wiggle. We've been sitting for a while. And just breathing into our space. That space within, the Holy of Holies within us. That part of us that remains untouched by human tragedy. That part of us that remains pure and whole no matter what happens. Heart to heart, hand to hand, soul to soul. We join together in this community, knowing that there is no time or space, that anyone watching this recording later is part of this consciousness. Breathing into this space, I invite you to just take a few breaths in the silence. Reflect on the last week. Where were you strong? Where did love and strength show up together? And just breathing into those questions in the silence. And in this consciousness, we do not blame, shame, or guilt. Whatever was, was. We responded with the best skill set we had, even if we were reactive and perhaps feel embarrassed now. It's okay. We're having a human experience, and that is what we have come to this place, to this planet to learn. And as we forgive ourselves and release anything that we're ready to release about this last week. We allow our minds to turn to the week ahead, not to plan out, but to just lay the groundwork. I am strong. I express the strength and vitality of God, of the oneness, of the universality. I express this which is difficult to explain in human words. I stand firm on my foundation of faith and allow the strength of my being to be the pillars around me that support me. And just affirming that into our consciousness for the week and days and months to come. And as we take into our hearts the prayers of those who are near and dear to us, our prayers for the world writ large, we just allow ourselves to enfold all of these concerns and gratitude with strength, knowing that what is to come can be met gently and willingly with the calm strength of our soul, that we can be poised in this strength. And we can allow ourselves to share this strength with the world. And we acknowledge, I express the strength and vitality of God. And so it is, and so it shall be. Amen. As always, our prayer chaplains and prayer team are available to offer confidential prayer support. Our lead prayer chaplain, Diane, is on the call today, or at a later time, you may email her at praywithdiane@gmail.com, and she will be happy to pray with you and to send your request in confidence to the Unity Halton Field Prayer Team and to Silent Unity, which is Unity's world headquarters, a prayer ministry which has been in prayer for over 130 years. And they will hold your prayer for 30 days, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We thank you for all of the financial gifts you share with this ministry. On the screen is our ways to support us. And we thank you for your generosity. If you're joining us for the first time, please sign up for our newsletter. You can find it at our website, and you can see under the newsletter. Sign up, you'll get one email a week, and it will give you all of the information about what's happening and what is to come. So thank you for joining us today. Many blessings.